Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Candice. We are in our fourth part of our Masculinity and Femininity in the Bible series, which is our third part of our Abraham and Sarah story. We're going to be wrapping up Abraham and Sarah's story today. Where we left off in part 2 was right when Abraham and Sarah decided to go ahead and try and go ahead of God, and they had Abraham sleep with Sarah's handmaid, Hagar, and Hagar ended up bearing a child, Ishmael. Today we're going to continue on with that. We're going to start off in Genesis chapter 17, but before we do, let's go ahead and pray for this video real quick and then we'll dive right in. God, thank you for giving us these stories to learn from and to utilize and to show us more of you and your goodness and your kindness, and to give us just lessons to relate to our own lives, Papa. I ask that you would bring this video to anybody who needs to hear it, and that you would bless them thoroughly through it. I ask these things in Jesus Christ's name. Alright, so we are going to start part 3 here in Genesis chapter 17. Genesis chapter 17 verses 1 through 8. So we just finished off chapter 16 where it said that, Hagar ended up having a child, having Ishmael. And so now we're going to continue on with that. So if you got your Bibles, you can go ahead and read along with me. It says, and when Abram, and if you've been here for the series, Abram and Sarai, their names got changed to Abraham and Sarah by God, which is going to happen in this part. So if I use those interchangeably, just so you know they're the same people. Let's see, and when Abram was 90 years old and 9, so he's 99, guys, he's up there, the Lord appeared unto Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Now, so far, he hasn't had any kids except Ishmael with Hagar, so the whole being a father of many nations thing, he's like, okay, God, but I'm not seeing it in real life yet, Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And it keeps going. And God, tells Abraham to circumcise the men in the camp and stuff like that. And so it's been 13 years as of this point in the story. It has been, or no, not yet. Has it? Yeah, 99 years old. It's been 13 years, guys. So Hagar had Ishmael. And, Abram and Sarah went ahead of God, strived, ended up with Ishmael, and now it's been 13 years. So 13 years of them not getting the promise reiterated again. And so think about that. You kind of go against God, you do it your own way, and, now your husband has a son with your servant, and you have to live with that for like 13 years before you finally get some more news. Pretty tough stuff. I can only imagine. So 13 years they've been dealing with, the consequences of what they've done. And of course, Abraham is going to love his son Ishmael, like he had him. It is his son, technically. So of course they were going to develop a relationship over the years and stuff like that. But having to deal with that long of knowing you did something that God didn't want and then waiting so long for God to reiterate that promise again, I can only imagine his relief, when God finally does come back and tell him, yeah, I'm going to make a covenant with you. I'm going to make you a father of nations, kings are going to come out of you, stuff like that. All right, we're going to skip ahead to verse 15. And God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. So this is the first time God is being like, yeah, you're going to have kids, but it's going to be Sarah that they're coming from. You're going to have a son with Sarah. because this whole time that was the whole doubt that ate away at them and then made them end up striving and trying to make the promise happen on their own. Let's keep going. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? And Abraham said unto God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. So in other words, he's thinking, okay, I'm going to have the promised child with Sarah, but now, what about Ishmael? What about the kid that I had, that I wasn't necessarily supposed to be having, but what about him? Because I love him too, And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. So, God has told this promise to Abraham a few times, saying that, yes, you're going to be a father of nations. I'm going to make a covenant with you and your seed after you. And they thought, him and Sarah kind of went together and were like, oh, well, he didn't say anything about Sarah. He didn't say anything about me. So why don't we just have you go sleep with my maid and have a child, And they did. And I bet they felt really crummy about it afterwards because, of course, Hagar is not happy in the situation that she got used in such a way. And then, of course, you've got now, Ishmael, who didn't ask to be born the way he was. He didn't ask, to be kind of, the child that was out of sin or whatever, but it is what it is. And so Abraham still loves him. Of course, Abraham developed a relationship with him. I mean, over 13 years with a kid, you can't help but develop a relationship with him, And so now God is like, yes, my promise was legit, but it's going to be through Sarah. You guys are going to have a son together, and that's the one that I'm going to have this covenant with. And now Abraham's like, oh, what about Ishmael? What about my kid? And God says he'll bless him. He says he'll bless him and multiply him too, But God's original promise still stands that this is the one that I wanted you to have a child with. I wanted you and Sarah to have a child together because that's what I wanted for this covenant that I'm making with you. So God still has this covenant, but he also, is going to bless Ishmael in this. Which I think is a good thing to take away from this story, is the fact that, even when we go against God, even when we strive and try and do things ourselves, God will forgive us of our sins, but there are going to be consequences to those sins. He doesn't just get rid of the consequences that come along with it. So Abraham and Sarah strove against God, had Ishmael. But the consequence, was that, Ishmael's going to be with you now for 13 years. And now Sarah, of course, is dealing with 13 years of knowing that her husband had a son with somebody else, and all of the issues that come along with that and all of the emotions and everything that come along with that. And I imagine there's a lot of guilt on Abraham's part too, and things that he had to deal with through all of that. And then trying to co-parent with Hagar, who's PO'd at you, she's pissed off and mad about it all. God will forgive us every sins, but he doesn't always take the consequences of those sins away. So it's if you sin against him by watching porn, okay, and God will forgive you of that, but having to deal with that extra lust and temptation afterwards, that's a consequence of the sin that God might leave you to deal with for a while before he finally takes it from you. You know what I mean? All right, let's keep going. We're going to go to chapter 18. Now, the little part that we skipped over here in this chapter was talking about him, doing what God asked him to do. So God asked Abraham to circumcise the men, walk perfectly with me, be in a relationship with me, then I will give you the promise, And I think that's important for all of us to remember too, is whenever he gives us a promise, he's only going to give it to us if our first priority is him. Our first priority has to be him before he can bless us with all the extra things, because he doesn't want us to turn our promises into an idol. He doesn't want us to, like put our worth and our value in whatever promise it is, whether it be a job, a career, a house, a marriage, whatever, kids. He doesn't want us to put our entire worth and value into those things. He wants us to have our worth in him and have our value and our relationship with him be the first thing first. And that's what he says, what he shows here, like he told Abraham to walk with him first, and you're going to walk with me by doing this. And so Abraham went and did it. And then God reiterated the promise to him. Okay, now that you're doing the things that I need you to do, now you're having that relationship with me and not making this promise into an idol. Okay, now I can give it to you. So, chapter 18, verses 1 through 15. And the Lord appeared unto him, Abraham, in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself towards the ground, and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts, after that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. So Abraham's hanging out. And these 3 guys show up, angels of the Lord, if you will. They show up, and he immediately, is generous and hospitable to them, and like, hey, why don't you chill here? We'll get some water to wash your feet so you can freshen up. I'll get you some food, stuff like that. Like, just chilling out and being hospitable to these guys, which is a good thing. Let's keep going. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd, and fetched a calf young and tender, and gave it unto a young man, and he hastened to dress it. And he took butter and milk, and the calf which he has dressed, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to thy time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age. And it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah's already gone through menopause. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. So the Lord shows up, which some people say it was probably God, some people say it was probably Jesus, a couple angels or whatever showed up. And the first thing, Abraham does is he's super hospitable. He's like, okay, let me get you guys some food, let me get you guys some water, chill out here in the shade, rest yourselves, hang out. And, so he does all the hospitable things. Sarah does too. She's making the food. They bring it on out. She's hanging out in the tent door, and they're like, yeah, Sarah's going to have a child next year. And Sarah's like, say what? You sure about that? I'm 90 years old. I already went through menopause. Like, I had to watch my periods stop. Like, all the chance of having a child go away. And you're telling me that I'm going to have a kid? And the Lord's like, is anything too hard for the Lord? I think that's a good point to take away. For any issue you have, any promise that he's told you that you're like, it looks almost impossible for this to come to pass, is anything too hard for the Lord? And the answer to that, of course, is no. God can do anything he wants at any time, through any means he deems necessary. He's that powerful. And that's the thing, after women go through menopause, scientifically, we don't have, any more eggs that are dropping. So technically, women don't have kids after menopause. I think God did this number one, to show that, the impossible is possible with God. Like, God can do anything he wants. He used this to show that. He also used this to, really, I think, bring Sarah back into check. Like, she had been wanting a kid for so long, that she strove and had Hagar have a kid for her, And then after that happened, then of course, she has to watch her body not work in the terms of having a kid anymore. And so she had to go through the grief of that, and like mourning it and mourning that her body was no longer, in regular terms able to do that anymore. So she finally probably got a realistic perspective on this and stopped making having a child an idol, probably got back to her time with God and just hanging out with him, and just being there and not, trying to reach for all these different things and the striving and all that. And then, after you've finally given up all hope, come to the reality of what it is, and then you're like, wait, it's coming? This promise, are you sure about that? Like, really? I've been waiting so long, are you sure? Like, the excitement must have been intense. We're going to skip ahead again, because this is kind of goes through where God's talking to Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah, I think. Yeah. Talking about how he's going to, go ahead and burn Sodom to the ground, more or less. And, Abraham has this full-on conversation with God where he's like, but what if there's 20 men that are righteous? Would you burn the whole city down for 20? If there were 20 men who are righteous, what if there were 10 men who are righteous? Like, he has this whole conversation with God, and I think it's cool, just if you haven't read through that part of Genesis, to go ahead and read through it on your own time. It's kind of cool the way God, has these full-on conversations with Abraham, knowing, of course, he knows what he's already going to do. He already knows what Abraham's going to say, but he takes the time to have this relationship, and like that kind of relationship where you consult with somebody and talk to them about the decisions you're making, It's good stuff. We are going to skip to verse 17. Wait, what? 17 to 21? Oh, yeah, so we are going to read just a little bit of this, 17 to 21. There was a reason for it. I had it in my notes. And the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham the thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. And the Lord said, Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it which has come unto me, and if not, I will know." And I just wanted to read these few verses here because to point out that God, God already knows, like, God is outside of time. So, like, he knows that he knew he was going to give Abraham a child. He knew that Abraham's going to raise Isaac well, that Isaac's going to raise his generations well. Like, God already knows the end at the beginning. So he's, outside of time, and he's making all of these really huge decisions because he already knows what's going to happen. But then he takes the time to, again, go and talk to Abraham about it. Like, just shows how much he really cares about us and how much, he values his relationship with us, because he can just do anything he wants and he doesn't have to explain himself to us at all, But, like, for him to actually have a full-on conversation with Abraham about it was pretty cool. All right, we are going to skip to chapter 20, because the next chapter, so it's just about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, if you were around for the first part of the series, or the Abraham and Sarah parts of the series, you'll know that they journeyed into, was it Egypt? It was like Egypt or something like that, and, Abraham told Sarah to say that she's his sister, which technically she is his half-sister, but to say that she is his sister, so that way, people would think she was single and he was single, and they wouldn't, try and kill him to take her because apparently she's beautiful. Now, in chapter 20, this is kind of a similar scenario that's happening again, just someplace else. And she's 90 years old, mind you. Remember that. She's 90 years old. Now, 90 years old isn't exactly like our kind of 90 years old. I think she lives to 127 years old. So she still has another 37 years ahead of her. But still, let's just read it. And Abraham journeyed from thence towards the south country and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." Because apparently he didn't learn the first time. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife." But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation?" Oh my goodness, I didn't know that he said she was single. What is going on, Said he not unto me, "She is my sister?" And even she herself said, "He is my brother, and the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this." God, don't blame me, it wasn't my fault. And God said unto him in a dream, "Yea, I know that thou didst in thy integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffereth I thee not to touch her." So basically God saying, I made sure you didn't with another man's wife, Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning, and called all his servants, and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham, and said unto him, "What hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said unto Abraham, "What sawest thou that thou hast done this thing?" And Abraham said, "Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister, she is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me at every place whither we shall come. Say of me, He is my brother." And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, "Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee." And unto Sarah he said, "Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other." Thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So we basically get Egypt part 2 here. Abraham and Sarah obviously, didn't fully learn the lesson the first time around, so they're doing it again. They go into a place, and because Abraham says, say you're my sister, she submits to her husband, she rolls with it, and lets him do what he will. I'm sure she's trusting God in this, as she's going, "Okay, Abraham, you want to do this again? All right, God got us out of this last time," And so she goes along with it, and then the guy takes her, And it doesn't say exactly how long she was there, or how long she had to wait, before the guy realized, oh shoot, what did I just step into, But obviously it was at least for a little while, because it says, they knew that everybody in Abimelech's household wasn't bearing children. So you gotta be at least a few months there, I imagine, to realize that, oh, nobody's having kids, nobody's getting pregnant, But, of course, God steps in yet again, even though Abraham is wise in so many other things, and he makes a lot of good decisions in general. He has this really good relationship with God. He still falls prey to fear from time to time, as people do, as a lot of men and women do. both genders are about that. But again, God steps in when we need him to the most, and it all went well. Now, chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. The promise, guys, is finally happening. Oh my goodness, Kitty. She wants to lay on the Bible. Where are we at? And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken unto him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that will hear me will laugh with me. And she said, Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And we're going to stop it there, because as it continues, it kind of gets into Hagar's story, and we're going to do Hagar next. But, so, in terms of masculinity and femininity, we've had this list now that we've been kind of working on and adding to, where, men are kind of, the more competitive ones. Men are more into the leadership roles, and this doesn't mean, that women can't be in leadership or women can't be competitive too. We're just talking about, like the major traits that are distinctly almost usually present in men versus usually present in women. Things can switch in along the spectrum of things, but we were just stating traits that, kind of go along with each gender. So for when we talked about like Adam and Eve and stuff, we said that the men have drive, like they're ambitious, working on something, they've got their purpose and whatever God's given them purpose to do, and they're working towards that. They also are providers, they want to provide for their wives, they want to provide for their families, they want to be the one being like, yeah, here, I'm working to give this to you, I'm working to provide this for you, right? We also said leadership, that they were leaders in their roles. Let me see if I can find my notes real quick from that. Because I had a whole list. Where'd it go? There it is. We also said that men were the initiators, usually, They're the ones who are going to step forward and ask a woman to marry them. They're the ones who are going to start things. They're going to, work those ideas out and get moving on them. We also said responsibility, that men have a lot of responsibility to provide. They have the responsibility, if you're in marriage, they have the responsibility over their wives, That doesn't mean wives are less than or anything like that. We'll probably do a study on that later. But at the end times, when we're all on our knees before God, husbands are going to bear an extra bit of responsibility that God has given them. What else did I have? They are protectors, And then we said for women that they are receptive, women are helpful, women are relational. Like, we get most of our worth and our value and our happiness out of our relationships with other people, whether that be spouses, family, friends, stuff like that. We are, kitty, we are, get your tail out of there. We are helpmeets. Let's see. We are usually a bit on the more emotional side. We are usually the ones who are under the husband's headship, so a bit more submissive, And again, that doesn't mean weak or anything. It just means you're kind of deliberately being like, okay, he's going to get the end vote and things. And just roll with it and trust God, What else did we say? We also said when those... Stop it. We also said, like, we were going into some of the negative traits of passivity for men, being emotionally distant, permissive or irresponsible. For women, it would be initiating, striving, being vulnerable or easily manipulated. And in regards to this part of the Abraham and Sarah story, we have Abraham stepping up. He's having that relationship with God. He's being a leader. He's, providing for his family. He's even providing for Ishmael and Hagar while they are there with him. He's kind of taking responsibility that, okay, I got her pregnant, now I'm going to help raise the kid, because he obviously loves Ishmael. He's taking the time to be with him and be responsible as a parent, which is a good thing, but then on the negative side in the story, yes, he does get a little bit afraid and, says, she's my sister, but again, we are all human, and positive and negative traits are present in all of us. On the feminine side, so on Sarah's side in this, she was striving when she had, Hagar sleep with her husband, and she was trying to go ahead of things, such as some of those negative feminine traits, but then, 13 years of being with Ishmael around and Hagar around, she seems like she's a little down, just kind of more of a reality check. She almost seems a little depressed, being like, hey, am I really gonna laugh this old in age, But she still has that relationship with God. She still has a relationship with her husband. Her world is still a relationship, as women are. And, she doesn't argue with Abraham in the Egypt, or they're not in Egypt, Kadesh, and Shur. Yeah, that's where they're at this time. But she doesn't argue with him when he says this. She kind of submits to it and trusts God in the process, because she knows that God got her out of it the last time. So she trusts God again, which is a good trait. It's a positive trait. And then she does finally receive the promise and have the promised child, which is just kind of a beautiful ending to that. All right. I will see you guys next time. Bye.